Hey guys, this is Joseph Lucero of Powerlifting Technique, and today we're going to talk about should powerlifters do the overhead press. So, a lot of times we see the overhead press in strongman and traditional weightlifting programs just because the overhead extension makes sense for some athletes. But for powerlifting, we squat, we bench, we deadlift. The shoulder press is where the bar is located on the upper chest, and it's a vertical type of press. Now, opposing that is the bench press. It's a horizontal type of press. Now, I know me benching here doesn't make sense. Usually you lay on your back and you bench, and that seems vertical. But if we're talking from the anatomical position where an individual is standing forward, palms up, moving the bench press in this fashion is horizontal. But end of the day, overhead press is up and chest press is away. And a lot of people think, well, if I need to get better at this, there's no reason to do this. So there are some truths to that because when you bench press, you overload your pecs, your front delt, and your triceps. When you overhead press, you don't overload your chest. You just overload your shoulders and your triceps. So it kind of makes it tricky to where when you compare both, you're missing the most dominant muscle group, which is the pecs. So that makes a lot of powerlifters think, why would I want to do that? And at the same time, when you do the overhead press, you're working yourself in a very vulnerable position, especially if you're standing. So it's really hard to stabilize the overhead press. It makes it very tricky. And sometimes powerlifters talk about, end of the day, you only have so much time in the gym. Why am I going to worry about this motion over my head when I'm missing my pecs, when it's hard to stabilize the weight and it doesn't really, quote unquote, add to my bench press? But what I'm here to tell you is that every power lifter should overhead press. Now, just because it's an overhead press doesn't have to mean it's a traditional one where it's this barbell going over top. Some variations of the overhead press are like the standing military press, a push press where you get to use your hips, the clean and jerk. You could do like a dumbbell shoulder press. There's so many different ways to go about it. And I think powerlifters should do some kind of overhead press because that stability issue we were talking about earlier could really add to your bench press. You might be recruiting some different types of muscles when you do an overhead than you do on a horizontal kind of press. And those types of muscles might be the stabilizers you'll need one day when you try to go to max effort on bench press. Like I told you before, the bench press overloads the chest, which you can't do with an overhead press. But what if you change the angle of the overhead press? So a lot of what I like to do with my clients who are powerlifters is, we'll do our squat day, bench day, deadlift day. And then for the secondary press, I like to start them off at not a 90, but like a 70-degree incline dumbbell shoulder press. And what happens there is because the chest is exposed just a little bit more, you'll hit the upper pecs, you'll hit the deltoids a lot, and you'll hit the triceps. And doing lifts from different positions is going to recruit your muscles differently, which will fatigue them differently, which will help them grow differently. If you become the master bench press, so you bench press all the time, it's been several years, and you get better, 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 you decrease energy usage. So what happens is you become energy efficient. And when you become energy efficient, you're using less muscle. So that's a good thing. But it's also a bad thing in training because what if we're having a problem with our lockout on bench and we want those pesky triceps to grow? What if we're having a problem with the bottom of our bench press and our front deltoids aren't firing? Because you've mastered the bench press so much, you're not recruiting those muscles anymore and you need to find a way to fatigue them. Now you could do, different types of cable exercises for your triceps and different exercises for your deltoids, but we have to get away from the stereotype of the overhead being such a problem because when you overhead press, you're going to overload those muscles, those pressing muscles, from a different position, which is going to help them fatigue a lot differently than they would in a horizontal position. If we want to see growth in these pressing muscles, we're going to have to challenge them a little bit differently. And I also do things with powerlifters where, if I want them to grow the triceps more, If you keep doing triceps in front of your body and you can see your arms, you're only going to go so far with tricep recruitment. What if you did things like a French press, get the ropes and do the extensions behind the head? That's going to target the tricep a lot differently than something in a horizontal position, which is going to help those muscles grow a bit more, because you want to get sore when you train. You want to get to the point where you feel the growth is going to exist, especially in an off season. So we need to challenge ourselves, not just from a horizontal position, a vertical position. We also need to go like in a diagonal position. We need to hit different angles to work our bench press a lot more. A lot of people argue the dips are great for bench press. And you know what? That's like a vertical form of extension. So why are we neglecting the opportunity to go overhead just because it might be limiting our chest? We need to challenge ourselves from different positions, pressing so that we can grow and stimulate fatigue for better development. So next time you get ready for your bench press day, you want to try to incorporate shoulder press in some way throughout the week. I would definitely recommend shoulder press being recommended on your secondary press day. I would go sets of 10, 8, 6, or 5. And in fact, for a powerlifter, because you pause at your chest, maybe you want to pause at the dumbbell at the bottom of the shoulder press, whether it's a standing shoulder press, a 70 incline shoulder press, whatever it needs to happen. I would definitely recommend, working sets of 10, 8, 6, or 5. I wouldn't go lower than 5 necessarily, because if you think about it too, if you have such an issue stabilizing the weight, only hitting a set of 5 might restrict how much you can overload those muscles. So maybe you work your way down so that by the peak, you're at sets of 5, you get some kind of volume while you're peaking and you're training, maybe just decrease the weight a little bit, work on form. But I do believe if you want to be a better powerlifter, you're going to have to challenge your shoulder press, challenge those stabilizer muscles, the deltoids, the triceps, and work them from a different position, which will stimulate fatigue, which will evoke growth for better development of pressing muscles to aid your bench press. If you like this video and you want to learn more, check us out at powerliftingtechnique.com. Subscribe, like, leave a comment, and hopefully we'll catch you next time too. Thank you.